Hey folks, me again, back again with another video for y'all. Today I'm going to be reacting to the Polymega. It's basically like the Xbox. If you're a fan of the classic Xbox like myself, you'll love the Polymega. So, hope you enjoy, like, subscribe, and I'll try to make this video as long as I possibly can, so let's begin.
Time, I originally got to take a look at this last year at E3, and initially I was skeptical, but after messing around with it for a bit last year, I walked away impressed. And so now I am excited to get this review unit in here and run it through its paces. So what is this thing? Well, it is a standalone clone system that attempts to be everything to everybody. The scope of this project is absolutely insane.
Everything to everybody.
Because the whole concept with this is that you would buy these modules that you can detach and attach to the
and
top
put
there
the cartridge in there.
Give you different functionality and support of all these retro consoles. However, the base unit
meets
that I have
everybody.
here to review is pretty cool because it
all those
comes
parties.
with a CD slot drive that supports the Sega Saturn, the Sega CD.
If you're a fan of classic gaming like myself, you'll love this.
As well as the PlayStation 1 and the TurboGrafx CD, all out of the box. And it wants to support all of this with its own interface, its own ecosystem, its own controller, and doing it with very little lag and basically crystal clear HDMI.
My best advice to y'all is to save up money and get you one.
It's important to know that this retails for $400 for the base unit, and then
if you can find one cheap enough,
when released, I believe will be $80 on top of that. So you can kind of customize what you want to use this for, and basically pick and choose the different types of consoles that you are interested in and collect for. So what's going on the inside of this box? Well, in there you have an Intel.
It's kind of like the Xbox meets the PS4 to say the least.
It also supports Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. It's an HDMI 2.0 connection. There's gigabit Ethernet, which is kind of an interesting addition there, as well as 2 USB ports. It also comes with onboard storage, so there is 32 gigabytes of flash memory, although when you get it from the factory, it actually has the operating system on it, as well as a bunch of games, and we're going to get into that. So when I booted mine up and installed the latest firmware, I had about 9 gigabytes free. But that's okay, because you can also install your own SSD flash drive in here.
You know,
so
they have this, they have miniature screwdrivers, right?
Which should be more than enough for most gamers. And then it has an 8-speed DVD drive, and in running all of this is a proprietary Linux-based operating system.
Oh, that's nice.
And then it comes with the console system BIOS.
And you get to play PS1 games on there. Yay!
And they license these from third parties. Now, this is huge because you hear about a lot of these clone systems where they would try to ship these to customers, and then the customer is expected to go on the
classic Saturn,
Google and download the BIOS of the different consoles that they
Sega
want to
CD.
Well, here you don't have to. That they've actually licensed and basically configured them to run specifically with this. However, when we get into the games, I'll tell you why you might want to go get your own BIOS. At least there's the option for that, and it's a nice thing to have. But again, not having to go out on the internet and configure this thing at all, it's basically just plug and play. In my mind,
I always love old games like this. It takes me back.
When they first announced this project years ago, they said they're going to try to accomplish all of this.
A Star Wars fighting game.
And as you guys know, that's a very solid and compatible way of doing it, but it can also be very expensive. And so, since that time, they said they're going to switch over to emulation. That's what this is using right here. And when we get into playing the games, you can see how successful that is. Now let's go ahead and talk about the controller for a second here. So as you can see, it is a custom-made controller, specifically for the Polymega.
Nice.
And it really feels
it reminds you of the PS4.
The PlayStation 4 controller, which I think is a very good thing. It's a very light controller. It has a very nice feel to it. As you can see here, it's got a bunch of buttons that you might expect to cover pretty much all of the different consoles that you're going to be playing. It functions as a wireless controller, or you can plug it directly into the Polymega with the provided cable here that will charge it, as well as
I'm more of a
latency.
classic gamer, because wired controller, you don't have to worry about batteries and have to change it every time it goes dead.
As much as possible. They know old school arcade games need to have as little latency as possible, and they've worked really hard to try to minimize that as best as they can. It also supports a bunch of third-party wired and wireless controllers.
There you go.
I messed around with a wired Xbox 360 controller, as well as this Genesis-style 8-button arcade pad from Retrobit. So as you can see, there is a lot going on with the Polymega, but I am ready to put it through its paces. I have a stack of games covering a bunch of different systems here that it supports out of the box. So let's take a look. When you first turn this on, you're brought into a menu system that
PlayStation,
looks pretty nice.
drag it.
I was pleasantly surprised at how this
PAL
looks,
version
the navigation,
NES,
the colors, just how
SNES.
quick it is. But I guess that shouldn't be much of a surprise because the people who made the Polymega have a history of shipping AAA titles and also working on other digital marketplaces and interfaces like this. So they're taking all that knowledge of software development and applying it to the interface for the Polymega. One of its coolest features is that you can connect to your Wi-Fi and then download a database of games that it supports and knows about. And it's impressive because I was throwing all sorts of games at it,
that's
both
nice.
North American as well as
Watch
Japanese
for
and other regions.
Japanese.
It just seemed to recognize all of them. Beyond that, you can go into the details of the
Saga
game.
on the Sega Genesis.
You can look at screenshots, and then check this out. Down below,
The Addams Family.
like, this game is similar to these others that you might want to check out, which is really cool if you're looking for new games to play. And depending on the game, it'll give you other information.
Wacky Races, and I love that
this
show.
developer also created these games, or sometimes it'll tell you, like, yeah, these are some other games that
Today,
were released the
we
same
broast
year.
for that
So
October.
it's a pretty cool interface where you can get information about the game you're playing, but
The broaster.
as a gamer,
You know
find out
that
about
that new
games you
fry
wanna
technique,
check out.
broaster.
Now, one of the systems that
Today,
I was most interested
we
in
broke.
testing with this is the
Today,
Sega Saturn.
we broached.
Because the Sega
For
Saturn
October.
is notoriously difficult
I love that
to
guy,
running
that actor's
even on a
voice.
PC, and they are claiming that you should be able to play pretty much most Sega Saturn games. So let's go ahead and check some out. I'm going to go ahead and put in my copy of Galactic Attack. So you have a couple things that happens here. First, it brings up a nice little graphic on the screen there, and then you have the option to play or manage. Now we're going to go into manage, and there you can see that you can start installing it to the hard drive. So that is pretty cool because if you do that, you don't have to use the disk anymore. So it basically just rips it straight to the hard drive. That improves the load times, and again, you'll never have to wear out your original disk. Notice when you go to play the game, you're given two options. So the first default one is enhanced mode, and there you basically get the ability to do save states, so you can save and load at any time that you want. Plus, you can play the game with fan-made patches and translations. So that is a really cool option if you're a game
Yes, that's a
collector
good
like me,
option.
especially for the Sega Saturn, because Sega Saturn games in North America tend to be fairly expensive, but now
If you can
go
find
and
them.
get the Japanese version, which might be a little bit cheaper, download a fan-made translation patch and run it straight off of here, no problem. The other option is to start the game in classic mode, and that's really for people who primarily are maybe competitive gamers. They play it and do speed runs, things like that. Basically, it removes the ability to use any patches or any save states, and it actually does a little banner down in the corner so that your viewers know that that's the version that you're running. And as you can see here, Galactic Attack looks and runs great. It's outputting at 1080p at 60
Sorry for my
frames
camera
a
quality,
second.
folks.
And notice that it's keeping its normal 4:3 aspect ratio. So it does that by default. And since we are playing on the Sega Saturn, I thought it'd be cool to check out the Retrobit 8-button arcade pad. Yeah, connected just fine. Didn't have to install any drivers or anything. It just worked. Now let's go ahead and check out some other Sega Saturn games, including Virtua Racing. As well as Solar Eclipse. As well as one of my favorites, Panzer Dragoon 2. One thing I was a little surprised to see is that it also works with fan-made burned games. So Here you see Police Knots for the Sega Saturn, but it has the English patches attached to it. You pop it in, and it runs it fine. And then we're going to check out Robotica. Now, this is a fairly common Saturn game, but the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because it highlights something that a lot of game collectors have to deal with, and that is that sometimes your original media could be dirty, could be damaged, and the Polymega just may not even recognize it. And so I ended up having to clean the disc fairly thoroughly to get the Polymega to recognize it. Again, it's not the fault of the Polymega itself, it's just that it's kind of, you know, what you have to deal with when you collect these CD games. But thankfully, it did recognize it, and I was able to install it to the hard drive, so I'll never have to deal with that again. Now let's go ahead and put in some Japanese Saturn games, which in some cases can be cheaper than the North American version. This is X-Men Children of the Atom here, a fighting game that looks pretty good. And then here is Virtua Fighter Remix, the Japanese version. You just put the disc in, the Polymega recognizes it and runs it just fine. And again, what's cool about this is that you don't have to go out and find the Japanese version of the Saturn BIOS. It's all built in and it just works. And again, some Japanese versions like Snatcher here are way cheaper than North American versions. North American version of Snatcher is probably hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. It's super expensive, but you can get the Japanese version for way cheaper here. Fan translation, you're good to go. Now let's go ahead and check out some Sega CD games, and it's been really wild to see Sega CD collecting taking off in the last couple years. I think this is going to be of interest for a lot of people because sometimes getting the original hardware, especially working, can be kind of pricey. It's nice that the Polymega just supports it out of the box. And this, of course, is Sonic CD, and I want to show you the save states working. So to do that, you hit the menu button on the controller. It brings that up right there, and then just like every other system that supports this, you can either save or load, and it's basically just instant. Now let's go ahead and check out a Sega CD game called Heimdall, and this is where I ran into a little bit of a hiccup. So put the game in, started it, and it starts playing FMV intro, and you know, it plays it for about a minute or so, and then all of a sudden it just skips it and goes right to the menu, which I thought was kind of odd. Now the game plays fine, and you can see the gameplay here, but for whatever reason I couldn't get it to play the entire FMV intro, which again is very weird. So I tried installing the game to the hard drive, I tried cleaning my disk, I tried putting in classic mode, which shouldn't really make any difference, but no matter what I could do, I could not get it to play or finish the intro, which I thought was really weird. Well, I finally figured out what the problem is. Now, remember at the beginning of the video where I mentioned that you could go out on the internet and download the official BIOS and use it on here? Well, that's what it was. So it's important to know that this still is somewhat in beta, or there's...
So anyway, folks, hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, follow me on Amino, TikTok, and Discord. God bless y'all, and I'll see you next video.